Hi, everyone.
Greetings. We were in Isaiah chapter 5. We thought to review again from verse 13 onwards to 24, where you have Isaiah's denunciation of a very prosperous generation of Israelites.
Therefore my people will go into exile for lack of understanding. Their men of rank will die of hunger, and their masses will be parched with thirst. Therefore the grave enlarges its appetite and opens its mouth without limit. Into it will descend their nobles and masses, with all their brawlers and revelers. So men will be brought low, and mankind humbled, the eyes of the arrogant humbled. But the Lord Almighty will be exalted by his justice, and the holy God will show himself holy by his righteousness. Then sheep will graze as in their own pasture. Lambs will feed among the ruins of the rich. Woe to those who draw sin along with cords of deceit, and wickedness as with cart ropes. To those who say, "Let God hurry, let him hasten his work, so may we see it. Let it approach. Let the plan of the Holy One of Israel come, so we may know it." Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own hearts and clever in their own sight. Woe to those who are heroes at drinking wine and champions at mixing drinks, who acquit the guilty for a bribe, who but deny justice to the innocent. Therefore, as tongues of fire lick up straw, and as dry grass sinks down in the flames, so their roots will decay, and their flowers blown away like dust. For they have rejected the law of the Lord Almighty, and spurned the word of the Holy One of Israel.
We could call this generation of Israelites in their unequal prosperity, because in the days of Uzziah, I remember in Isaiah 6, Isaiah is called the day, or rather the year that King Uzziah died, and that was the year of greatest prosperity in Judah. And we forget that all of this corruption goes along with prosperity, and that's something for us to think deeply about in the Western world. So progressivism flourishes in an environment like this. They've forgotten the law of Jehovah. Where are they going for light now? Well, or rather Maclaren has something to say about this. Well, what can God do with the people who are wise in their own eyes and yet are unutterably corrupt? Well, there's 6 woes here in this passage. He says, the prophet forces the end of a drunken nation on the unwilling attention of the roisterers, in verses 13 to 17, which throb with vehemence of warning and gloomy eloquence. What can such a people come to but destruction? Knowledge must languish, hunger and thirst must follow. Like some monster's gaping mouth, the pit, that is hell, yawns for them, and drawn as by irresistible attraction, the pomp and the wicked, senseless jollity slide down into it. In the universal catastrophe, one thing alone stands upright and is lifted higher, because all else has sunk so far: the righteous judgment of the forgotten God. The grim picture is as true for individuals and their deaths as for a nation and its decay. And modern nations cannot afford to have this ulcer of drunkenness draining away their strength any more than Judah could. By the soul only are the nations great and free. There's a nice line. By the soul only are the nations great and free. And a people can be neither when they drink fiend. The drink fiend has his way. So, of course, Maclaren's writing this at the height of the temperance movement, because many could see that the Industrial Revolution was having a very undesirable effect on the working classes. They were becoming, as they had been 150 years or so before, a sodden nation. So during, you made reference to the
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 boots.
rise of the boots during this period to take care of the urban squalor, the Salvation Army during this very period.
Three woes follow, which are closely connected, that pronounced on daring evildoers, who not only let sin draw them to itself, but go more than halfway to meet it, needing no temptation, but drawing it to them eagerly, and scoffing at the merciful warnings of fatal consequences, comes first. Next is the woe on those who play fast and loose with plain morality, sophisticating conscience and sapping the foundations of law. Such juggling follows sensual indulgence, such as drunkenness, when it becomes habitual and audacious, as in the preceding woe. Loose or perverted codes of morality generally spring from bad living, seeking to shelter itself. Vicious principles are an afterthought to screen vicious practices. The last subject of the triple woes is self-conceit and pretense to superior illumination. Such very superior persons are emancipated from the rules which bind the common herd. They are so very clever that they have far outgrown the creeping moralities which may do for old women and children. Do we not know the sort of people? Have we none of them surviving today?
So when he talks of the new morality, I can't help but think that was a phrase that was very in when I was a teenager. The new morality was even captivating the imagination of the liberal church at that point, and now it's completely taken over.
Oh, yeah.
The idea that we've outgrown the morality of our ancestors, we've outgrown
This is
the
all,
morality of the
the
Bible.
Bible's is old-fashioned.
And of course, when you're a witness, you don't think of yourself as buying into this progressive mentality, but you do. You've got this same concept of new light, which by necessity is better than old light. Where do you get that faith from? Because the ancient world, including the Jewish, let's say the book of Daniel, the four beasts and the four metals and the image, Daniel chapter 2 and 7, they had a different concept of the flow of history. Things could go down
Yeah,
much more easily than they can go up.
right.
So this faith that comes out of the Enlightenment is part of our DNA if we're in a cult, because
Yeah.
we always believe that what we've got now is better than what
Yeah,
our ancestors
you're
had.
more influenced by societal norms than you like to think.
Yeah, you're swept along by the spirit of the world. And here's Maclaren's last comments. Then Isaiah comes back to his theme of drunkenness, but in a new connection. It poisons the fountain of justice. There is a world of indignant contempt in the prophet's scathing picture of those who are mighty and men of strength, but how is their strength shown? They can stand any quantity of wine and can mix their drinks and yet look sober. What a noble use to put to a good constitution. These valiant topers are in authority as judges, and they sell their judgments to get money for their debauches. We do not see much of such scandals among us. Well, he was very blessed. We see a lot of such scandals now. But yet, we have heard of leagues between liquor sellers and municipal authorities, which certainly do not make for righteousness. When shall we learn and practice the lesson that Isaiah was reading his countrymen, that it is fatal to a nation when the private character of public men is regarded as of no account in political and civic life? Certainly we've got that back again.
Yeah.
So a man's
Well,
morality
you know,
has nothing to do with his political performance.
When you were reading that, I was also thinking of how we legalized covetousness by gambling and lottery tickets and
All again in the last 50 years.
Yeah, it's all okay. It's all modern thinking.
The prophet had no doubt as to what must be the end of a state of things in which the very courts of law were honeycombed with corruption and demoralized by the power of drink. His tremendous image of a fierce fire raging across a dry prairie and burning the grass to its very roots, while the air is stifling with the thick dust of the conflagration, proclaims the sure fate, sooner or later, of every community and individual that rejects the law of the Lord of hosts and despises the word of the Holy One of Israel. Change the name, and the tale is told of us, for it is righteousness that exalteth a nation, and no single vice drags after it more infallibly such a multitude of attendant demons as the vice of drunkenness, which is a crying sin of England today. Mm-hmm. So just as men had to kill their conscience, because every man, no matter how ungodly, has a conscience, you kill it by constant sedation. Mm-hmm. And surely we've got that now, but you can't kill religion completely, so you must somehow transmute the religious impulse to something else. In Isaiah 8, you have the insight that in Isaiah's generation, the religious impulse was transferred to occult fascination. Mm. Check out Isaiah chapter 8 on that. So, no going back to the old past. The old light was Moses and the former prophets. The new light was occultic. And so you have Jeremiah coming 100 years after this and saying, no, look to the old past. And you have Malachi at the end of the Old Testament. So 300 years after this, Isaiah, the end of the Old Testament, 400 or so BC, saying, yes, one day we will have the Messiah, who will be the Son of Righteousness, full light. But until that day, we have Moses. Mm. So not saying that what had come in the meantime, and that meantime would be 1,000 years from Moses to Malachi, what had come in the meantime was not necessarily better than what God had given them in the beginning. We'll put a link into William Wilberforce from his book Real Christianity, where he makes the point that unbelief is without excuse. And also another video that Vivian did on C.S. Lewis, the inadequacy of scientific materialism, which can't explain conscience nor moral sense. Mm-hmm.